Hey everybody, today we're going to be going over a process that we quite literally just did in class. I'm putting a pause on my guitar build series because it has a humidity crack and or lack thereof of humidity crack in it, so I'm in the middle of repairing that. So I'm going to take a detour today, and I was just going to go over this topic again, which is the installation of this filler strip, which is what's going to entomb our truss rod. And this procedure has a pretty important and critical series of operations that I wanted to discuss and go over. And I did a lecture on it earlier today, but in case I have any non-students watching, or maybe former students watching that want to recap on this, or maybe anyone on Instagram and YouTube, I'm going to go over, reiterate some of the processes I went over in the lecture today. So I want to think of the truss rod in, three different positions. We have our back bow, and I'm talking about the truss rod here. I'm not talking about the neck. Although if you put the truss rod and back bow, or if it was a double action and you put the truss rod into relief, it should influence the neck. But I just want to iterate, I'm talking about the truss rod positioning specifically, not the positioning of the entire neck. So we have the back bow, we have the neck perfectly straight. I tend to call that zero, right? Because that's kind of ground zero. And then we have relief, which is where the neck is in a U shape, back bow, it's in an arch like so, and then this right here would be our 0 point. So this stage is important because of an extreme scenario that might happen with a single action truss rod. And I should specialize what we are specifically installing as a filler strip on a single action truss rod. What does single action mean? It means that you can only adjust the action in one direction. On double action truss rods, there's kind of a neutral point, and I can tighten it to the left from that neutral point, or I can tighten it to the right. So it can tighten in either direction, effectively putting the neck and back bow, or the truss rod in back bow for relief. The single action truss rod can only be tightened. So the only way you get relief is from string tension pulling on the neck, right? That's the only way you can get the relief with a single action truss rod. And the way that the truss rod bends is determined where you place the truss rod regarding its center of mass. The way that we've pocketed this channel, and the truss rod is slightly below the center of mass, so when we tighten this thing, it will flex and push the neck into a back bow position. Okay, so what is this kind of extreme scenario I was talking about? It's I go and I put the neck under string tension, and I have the guitar ready to play, and all of a sudden I notice that I have back bow in the neck, but no ability to loosen the truss rod further. So if I can't loosen the truss rod, and I've got back bow, and there's string tension on it already, and it's a single action truss rod, so the only way to get relief or back to zero is with string tension. And the only way to allow the string tension to pull it into relief or back to zero is by loosening the truss rod. But what did I just iterate? The truss rod has been fully deactivated, and we still have back as a problem. So the way that we're going to counteract that is with the procedure that starts all the way when we install this filler strip. So what we're going to do, we're going to tighten this thing, glue in this filler strip, so that the truss rod has at least a quarter to a half turn of activation. And the idea behind that is so that when I go to put string tension on this thing, and if even under string tension there's back bow on the neck, no problem, I can loosen the truss rod, allowing the strings to pull forward on it, and then put it back into its 0 point, or put it into a little bit of relief. So in other words, I will be leveling the fretboard of the guitar, I'll be leveling the frets of the guitar with the truss rod activated. So the truss rod itself will have a little bit of back bow in it when I level everything. It'll be activated, and so while the truss rod is in a slight back bow, slightly activated, I will level and take everything to zero. So I'll level the fretboard and the frets and make those perfectly straight, while the truss rod itself has a slight amount of activation. That way I'll have adjustability to both the left and the right once string tension's on the guitar. So I don't want to get glue on my truss rod. So what I do is when I install this filler strip, I apply glue to the sides of the truss rod, and then I'm going to just insert it in one swift motion so that all my squeeze out goes up. I don't want to pump the filler strip in. I don't want to shimmy it in. I want to make sure that I just insert it in one swift downward motion. That way, again, the glue squeeze out only comes up and out and doesn't go down onto the truss rod. Ideally, what I'm looking for is a pretty snug fit without wiggle. You can kind of hear, I don't know if you can hear it with the phone quality, but you can hear, definitely, can't feel it, but you'll have to take my word for it. The fit is pretty snug. Not so snug that it'll lift up the neck. In fact, I'd even actually ideally like it to be slightly more snug than this, but this will do just fine. It doesn't really wiggle at all, so this will work. All right, so what I do is I apply glue on the side, same thing on the other side. And then again, I'm gonna place it in one swift motion so that all my glue squeeze out comes up and out like that. I'm now going to put this under clamping pressure. And there's another trick we're gonna do with the truss rod, which I'll show you here momentarily. And the purpose for this is to ensure that this truss rod is actually fully seated in the channel. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stretch this thing out. So I'm going to deactivate the truss rod, right? So very clearly deactivated. I could have a little bit of wiggle room in the washer, and I'm going to bring it up just till I start feeling this thing want to activate. That's where I start getting resistance, right around there. And then at that point, I'm actually just going to crank this as much as I can. I'm going to try to do 1.5 turns. And you'll hear it make sounds that might be somewhat scary, but that's just the truss rod fully settling into place. Then what I do is while it's in that position, I like to loosen my clamps and then actually reclamp, just to make sure that everything is fully seated in my truss rod channel. I don't want to have a big space in between my truss rod, the neck, and the filler strip, because then this truss rod can't influence the back bow or the relief of the neck. Okay, then after this, I'm going to loosen the truss rod, back it all the way off, just like that, bump it right back up to where I'm getting resistance again. So it's right around there. Again, a fully disengage, bring it right up to where you get resistance. And then I bring it up to about right in between 1/4 and 1/2 turn, somewhere in between there. I'll do that one more time. So I disengage the truss rod fully, bring it up to the point of resistance, and then I do about just a little over 1/4 turn, about 1/4 to 1/2 turn. And I'm going to leave it there. And again, if I glue the fretboard on in this position, and I have this truss rod, which is now activated and technically in back bow, if I level the fretboard in that position, and then I go and I put the strings on, the strings will pull it into relief. I now have the ability to loosen the truss rod, and then add even more relief, or have the ability to tighten the truss rod and then resist the pull of the strings and put back bow into it. So it gives you, with a single action truss rod, adjustability in both directions. All right, that was actually a quicker live stream than I thought, but that is all I have prepared for the night. Thanks, everybody. I'll get back to our regular scheduled broadcasting by next week.